Everything needs work every day. So we don't strive for balance, we strive for abundance because that's what pushes us forward. It is a mindset. It's a very unshakable belief that you will handle any challenge that life throws at you.
Welcome to the Be Better broadcast. Today, we're going to talk about a topic that I love to talk about. We've had a lot of people on the show talk about it, and we always get one nugget of information that is different than all the rest when it comes to this topic, because confidence, what we're talking about today, really takes form in many different ways for everybody. And today, we're going to talk about what confidence is, where confidence really comes from, and how you can build confidence to excel in your family, your career, your business, and every facet of your life. To do that, we have a very special guest all the way from Arizona. Her name is Alexandra Dotcheva. She was born in Bulgaria, and she has a very specific process when it comes to this idea of confidence. And for those who don't know Alexandra, her passion for health, martial arts, fitness, and financial independence prompted her to write her book titled "It Really Is Simple: A Holistic Approach to Self-Confidence," in which she shares her path to success in order to motivate readers to embrace change and pursue their dreams in spite of fear and insecurity. By sharing her own journey to achieving control over the most important aspects of life, Alexandra's goal is to inspire others to turn away from various forms of fear and self-doubt and go after their dreams, instead of leading lives subdued to the conventional ways of thinking that have long been proven outdated, inadequate, and damaging to a person's self-esteem and self-confidence. Alexandra, just based on the very short conversation I've had with her, as well as all the material that I've read about her, all the research that I've done, is very philosophic in her thinking on confidence. And she's had many different roles in her life. And I'm very excited to dive into how confidence manifested there for her and how you can use those learnings to manifest confidence for yourself. When you take away even just one idea, strategy, principle, maybe we simply made you smile, all that we ask is you share this show with just one other person who could use it as well. You are the reason the Be Better broadcast has grown to over 300 episodes, over 100,000 downloads, because you are the best part of the Be Better team. So without further ado, let's talk to Alexandra Dotcheva, all the way from Arizona. It's great to have you here, Alexandra. Thanks for being on the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Brandon. It's such a pleasure.
Absolutely. So let's dive right into this thing, because there's so much I want to get to and there's so little time. You were born in Bulgaria, and throughout your life, you've held many different roles and titles and different levels of education. So just for those who are listening, and we can go deep into some of them as well, you graduated with a bachelor's in music while you were still in Bulgaria. Is that correct?
That's right. Yes, yes.
Okay. You were a symphonic musician for a long time, which is amazing. You are an investor, a registered nurse, a business owner, a coach. Like, you have so many different roles. And in order to transition between all those different roles, especially between industries, you have to have confidence and self-esteem to do that. So has that always been something that's been a part of you? Have you always been a confident person, willing to take a leap and take risks? And where did that come from?
I wish that were the case, Brandon, 20 years ago, but no, that was really not the case for a very long time. And because I overcame a severe lack of confidence and self-esteem that was 90% self-perpetuated, I have to say, started at age 11 or so, because I overcame this finally, this journey started 15 years ago. Okay, it took me about 5 to 7 years to accomplish, but this is how I build the confidence, by overcoming severe lack of it, right? So it started with the violin, stage fright that built over several years. I came to the States in 2000 to pursue my master's and doctoral degrees in violin, and I defended my monograph in 2007. And by that time, lots of orchestras had already started bankrupting because of the financial economic crisis in the United States. And as many of your listeners may know or may not know, that in the US, the orchestras really depend on wealthy people to support them financially, unlike many countries in Europe where the governments spend a lot of money for culture, for arts, The United States is not quite like that. So when the bankruptcy started, and I figured it was time to change, because there were musicians who were much better than me and much more confident stage-wise that went into completely different fields. And it was a very difficult time for me, 2008, when I decided to put myself to nursing school.
Wow. And that's such a giant change to go from being a musician in a symphony and being a part of that whole musical world. Your degree is in music. And a lot of people I know very personally and close to me who have a degree, they're thinking about switching jobs and they're only looking inside of their degree, right? And they think, okay, well, if I do something else and not use my degree, that would be a bad thing because I spent all this time and all this money pursuing one level of education. But then to move to a completely different field entirely of nursing, how did you navigate such a drastic change in work and lifestyle? What did that look like for you, that period of your life?
I was initially just as tempted as the people that you talk about to stay within the field, but I could not lie to myself anymore that I knew almost nothing about the rest of the world. And at 32 years old, this resulted in an early midlife crisis, a sense of deep unaccomplishment, and guilt for my basically laziness and reluctance to learn more about the rest of the world, because I thought that being a violinist, I'm the best of the best, just in terms of philosophy and understanding of how things really should be, when I didn't actually know jack about anything else. And I had to face that because the other thing that was knocking on the door of my head was poverty, realizing that so many orchestras were going under. You go to an audition and you compete, you play the first round is usually 10 to 15 minutes behind the curtain. You're competing against 40 to 500 people on the first round.
Wow.
Depending on how prestigious the orchestra is, right? And I was not competitive enough. I knew it. I mean, I made great progress in my playing in the United States. I had a fantastic teacher in Louisiana State University, Professor Kevork Merdirossian, who is now in Indiana, in Bloomington, one of the best schools in the United States. And in spite of how good he was, it was my mindset with my stage fright and my constant beating upon myself that I wasn't as good as I wanted to be that finally hit. It was real. I mean, my negativity was useless, but my lack of competitive skill was very real. So the two made a horrible combination. And with the history I had with self-doubt and truly lack of confidence on stage, I knew that this field has to be said bye-bye, because I needed something new. I needed a new challenge to start literally from scratch. And it was very scary because for 10, 15 years, you could never take me out of the practice room. And I read lots of books, but they were really philosophical. There was nothing about science, practical knowledge. I had no scientific knowledge, let alone in English, because my first 12 years of school, from the 1st to the 12th grade, were in a specialized music school.
Wow.
So it was terra incognita, the science field. So it was from scratch. And that's what was very helpful now that I look at it, because it turned my life upside down, my entire understanding about myself. I also, personally, I went through a divorce exactly at that time, and everything hit rock bottom. And when you start from the bottom, what is the only way? There are two ways, either sideways or up. And I chose up. So.
Yes, very true. I've never heard of the sideways way, but I guess that makes sense. That idea of when you were, when we're always a musician, right? I'm sure you have a deep love for music still to this day, and you correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm sure you still play to this day. Do you still play to this day?
No, sir. I haven't touched the violin since 2011 when I got my first job as a nurse, because I had been a musician for 26 years and I had made many hours. I was practicing about 7 to 9 hours a day.
Whoa.
So you either practice or you don't practice. And when you have missed so much knowledge otherwise, I figured this is a closed book right now. But I do listen to classical music every day.
Okay. Very
that I can't live without. I listen to it every day. That's beautiful. I just don't have to produce it.
Interesting. So I'm now just curiously asking, why don't you play anymore? I know you just said, if you're not practicing, you lose it, but you don't have to necessarily be symphony level and world-class level in order to enjoy it. Is this something you're passionate about, or is there a different instrument that you're more passionate about now?
Because I don't want my boyfriend of 15 years to run away. No, I'm joking. He thinks I should play, but no, it's not the same type of small muscle memory that's, I mean, it's not like swimming, like biking, like running that you never forget. With practicing the violin, I think it was Sarasate, the violinist, great Spanish violinist, who said, if I don't practice a day, I know it. If I don't practice a week, everybody else knows it. Wow. And just practicing an hour or two a day really isn't enough to maintain a great shape unless you have some kind of an amazing talent, which I never was. I have no problem saying this right now. Nothing in my life has come easy, and the violin was absolutely no exception. So when you have practiced so many hours and there are so many other things that you fight to occupy yourself, I really am at peace not touching it, because it's not fair to the instrument and music if I am just mediocrely, you know, just for the sake of touching it or playing it, you know, it doesn't work that way for me. Because when I dedicate myself to something, it's all or nothing. I'm very much a person like that. So
yeah, I think that's great. I think that's a great mindset. It's a slightly different mindset than me. And I think that's a beautiful thing. And you said something earlier where you always had these thoughts of you always wanted and thought that you should be better than you are. And you had this stage fright and this lack of confidence. And even with me, like I have thoughts all the time of I should be here when really I'm here. We always have these thoughts of I want to get to that next level. Am I moving too slow? Am I moving quickly enough, you know, compared to this other person? And then we get caught in the comparison trap. And even to this day, before I speak to a group of people, like that's what I do for a living. But even to this day, I get stage fright, not to the point where when I get up there, they would never know, you know, people would never say, oh, he looks really nervous, because I know what I need to do in order to get myself into that necessary state of being at that moment. But I feel that if you don't have that stage fright, at least a little bit, then you're actually not prepared enough and you're not ready to deliver your best performance. I believe that if you don't have that thought of, should I be better? Should I take it to that next level? Then it's going to be very difficult for you to be the top of your class, top of your industry, if that's a goal of yours. Do you agree with that? Is that self-talk important at times?
Absolutely. What you're saying is very relevant. And there is a difference how you take these thoughts. The thoughts you're talking about are relevant to a person who is already almost confident or confident in their abilities. But when you have these thoughts, when you use them to crush you rather than motivate you, that's where things have a turn a very different outcome. And that was my big mistake over many years, when I crushed my confidence just to thought that I was going to be better by saying I was not good. And I believed it. And when it doesn't motivate you, but rather degrades you inside your mind, that's what you believe. And the way you're looking at it is the way I had to learn over several years to look at it, to actually elevate my well-being emotionally and intellectually and in any other way. And that constant pursuing of more and more goals for the sake of self-improvement with a firm belief that you can improve, the fitness and martial arts was what really helped me in that respect. And then I transferred into nursing, because nursing is a huge responsibility when you have somebody else's life and well-being in your hands, depending on your integrity, knowledge, and compassion. That from the fitness and the martial arts went into the nursing, and then it went into investing later on and everything else. It's a great point that you're making, yes.
So that feeling has always been there, but the way that you look at that feeling has changed.
Yes.
How do you define confidence? What is it? Because when I asked you earlier, have you always had this confidence? And you said no, and you've always had to overcome these fears, these insecurities. What is confidence? Is it a state of being? Is it a mindset? Is it something you have or don't have? How would you define it?
It is a mindset. It's a very unshakable belief that you will handle any challenge that life throws at you. You will handle it well or to the best of your ability, but you're confident, you believe that you will be able to give it your best, regardless of the outcome. That's confidence. And that's what I really didn't believe at all for many years, that I would be able to handle any problem that was outside of my comfort zone. And my comfort zone was as narrow as you can possibly. Yeah. So there were lots of problems I did not believe I could handle.
Yeah. And okay, so you've written your book. And for everyone listening, the title of Alexandra's book is It Really Is Simple, a holistic approach to self-confidence, a practical guide. So I want to talk to you about, you know, what it takes in order to build this confidence, where we can acquire it, how we can adopt this mindset. But what was the moment for you that you're going through your life, you're a nurse, you're an investor, you're all these things, and you say, I want to write a book, and you choose to write a book about self-confidence? What was the moment that you knew that you had to get this book out into the world?
It was in January of 2020 when I was getting asked many questions from people around me, friends, colleagues, and even people at the grocery store or the fitness gym. How do you manage to do your nursing job? How do you manage to handle 3 rental real estate investment properties? I mean, businesses. The properties are more than that, of course, because with the businesses, you put several investments in a business, but at the time there were fewer, now there are more. How do you manage to be an options trader? How do you manage to go to the gym 4 days a week and exercise an average of 2.5 hours a day?
Wow.
How this, how that. And eventually I figured, well, I actually apply the same method in all areas of my life. And why don't I write this thing? And hopefully many people will get their hands on this book and find out how I did it, because personal experience and stories and the method is the best way to get under people's skin and help them believe that if I could do it, they can too. And it's all about the early midlife crisis, the crossroads in life, the self-inflicted lack of confidence and self-esteem for the sake of attention when you're young. And then that thing plagues you for when you're after your 30s, when you figure out you have nothing to show for. But how can you reverse this process is the really important part. And that's what the book is about. And that's how it came into my mind. And I wrote it in 6 months. It's 400 pages almost.
Yeah.
It took me 6 months to write, but because I'm a foreigner, then when I started editing it, right, it took 40 readings to edit before I even offered it to a professional editor with my publisher.
Wow, what a strength. So just again, English is not your first language. Is that correct? Okay.
Obviously.
You said it earlier. I just wanted to restate it. I mean, and then you write a book that's 400 pages in a language that isn't your native language. Yeah. And then you read it 40 more times to edit it before you get into a professional. And yet there's people where English is their first language and they're like, oh, I'm not a writer. I can't do that. And it's like, what are you talking about? Right? Like, look at you with English as a foreign language, and here you are writing this book, putting it together, because I'm assuming you knew that this is a message that had to get out there in the world. You knew this is something that you had to share with other people.
Yes, but I wanted to share it well and convincingly, and that was what took time with the editing. It was crazy because the structure of the book, everything was in my head the first 2 days when I started writing it, but polishing it, and then the editor helped quite a bit. We went back and forth 3 or 4 times. I disagreed with a lot of his suggestions, so we left it with the word. He said, this is going to alienate the readers and, you know, make lots of people upset and angry. I said, this is not supposed to be another sugar-coated, you can do it all book. No, it's a very real experience. It's very real language that I'm using. Sometimes I'm very encouraging. Sometimes I'm very blunt. I'm a Bulgarian. I'm an Eastern European Balkan woman in her middle ages. Yeah, I'm not nice. But I'm also the same way to myself. Yeah. So if I can handle myself, my own thoughts, other people should be able to handle them. At places in the book when I really try to make an important point that you can't just sleep through life and expect life to treat you nicely. It's, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think the results that you've shown and lived speak for themselves more than anything. I mean, you've lived more in your, you know, the years of your life than many have in their entire life. And that's not a comparison thing. That's a fact. And I think the fact that you decided to go all in on this book to put it out there speaks a lot about you. It speaks a lot about what your mission is. And it sounds like amongst all of your professions and all the roles you play, your mission is the same amongst all of those things. So I'd like to ask you and just dive into the nitty gritty. Let's say you're talking to somebody who didn't have the confidence that they want. They look at you and they're like, how do I do that? They're talking to you at the grocery store. They're talking to you everywhere. How are you able to do this, Alexandra? How can I become confident? Is it like a process of step 1, 2, 3? Like, what is it that we can do in order to become more confident?
For one thing, you need to realize where you're not confident, but you also need to look at the other areas of your life, because if you have been fixating on the area where you're not confident and trying to make yourself confident when everything else in your life is in complete disarray, that's part of the problem. And you find yourself distractions that prevent you from addressing the elephant in the room. So I see usually with my patients and other people that there are 3 of the 5 important areas that they're really neglecting. And the 5 areas are health, spirituality, career, finances, and relationships. But usually what I see is a big discrepancy and neglect of health, money, habits, and education and discipline. And then the relationships go down the hill from there. Or you influence yourself, get yourself influenced from somebody who is not knowledgeable about your health, or you're following their horrible health habits, and then you're just as sick or sicker than they are. And then financially, you follow the poor advice of relatives, friends, people who are just as bad financially as you are, but you guys feed off each other, and then you wonder why you don't have money for this and that, or to do the proper education or maintain your health properly, go to the gym, buy food that's healthy and as opposed to horrible for your health. All these things are so connected. So, I mean, the method is very simple, and of course, it takes more than just a 2-minute conversation at the store. But I basically, if it's a store conversation, I say I am extremely cautious of what I do in every area of my life, and I pursue it relentlessly, and I constantly improve all these 5 aspects. Nothing is out of my control. Everything is taken care of, and nothing is neglected. That's the short answer.
Wow. It's a lot to look at. So we've got relationships, career, finances, health, spirituality. We got these 5 key areas. How do we balance our actions in each of them? Should we focus on improving the one area that's holding the others back? Should we focus on the areas that are already strong? Where do we begin when it comes to those areas?
We begin by recognizing that everything needs work.
Everything.
Everything needs work every day. So we don't strive for balance, we strive for abundance, because that's what pushes us forward. When you find the balance, you're a dead man or woman. But abundance is where it never stops in a good way. Okay. So you enrich all these areas every day, and it is 100% your responsibility to do so. You don't rely on other people to do it for you. And in each of these 5 areas, you need to recognize what is stopping you. First of all, you need to see where you want to be. And you will find out that you're nowhere where you want to be in any of these 5 areas when you first start out, okay? When you first start out. And you recognize what's in the way. Usually it's your own mental habits. I talk about this a lot in chapter 8 in the spirituality, but in other chapters too. You find out what's in the way, whether it's you or circumstances around you that you can change or you can get away from. Okay. You see what you need to clear out of every single one of these 5 areas to clear room. So you remove the stuff that is in your way, that is not helping towards the growth of any of these 5 areas. And once you clear that space, then you can start building what you actually want. But it is a mental process that takes several days to truly face. And see, I was slow because I faced them one by one. Hence the book. The book is easier to get all these areas addressed, because then you can say, oh, it's not just my money that's the problem. Actually, I have several other problems that are just as important and I have been neglecting. So if I address everything now, I will boost myself that much more strong. And it doesn't necessarily mean faster, because the second you say that you want to achieve something faster, that's already like Gary Vaynerchuk says, that's vulnerability. That's your own vulnerability. You have to have the patience, but once you realize that there are more than just 1 or 2 things to work on, that's what's supposed not to throw you off and crush you, but motivate you. And that's when you really get in full gear and say, okay, this is what I'm going to do in my health, spiritual life, career, finances, and relationships, all at once, at any point in my life, until the day I die.
Okay.
And that is the commitment to yourself until the very day you die. And that's how you build on and create the life that you want. And it doesn't take till the day you die to create the life that you want. You achieve that abundance really faster than you think once you start taking all these little steps one by one. It's amazing how it works in every area once you give your attention to all these 5 aspects.
Okay. So work on it all at once. Okay. So I'm just hearing an imaginary person over here who's saying, oh man, how am I going to work on all 5 of those areas all at once. I've got children, I've got my job, I've got all these different things that I do. I take care of this person or take care of my parents.
Mm-hmm.
Like, so now immediately the reasons why it's not possible start creeping in. So I want to confront maybe some of those reasons. But from what you're saying, it sounds like a really good place to start is to sit down or maybe stand up, go for a walk.
Ground zero, the best place to start.
So would it be valuable then to write down where we are now in each of those 5 areas, as well as what you mentioned, where we want to be? So now versus the end destination.
Yes.
Would you say that's a good place to start?
That is exactly what I wrote in the first chapter, the self-evaluation. You want to write it in all aspects of the life, because you will then throw many more problems at yourself than you ever thought were possible solving. And this is what opens your imagination, your mind, way more than if you just fixate on the immediate problem that you're perceiving as an immediate problem, because your perception is limited, very subjective. But if you really look at your life in its entirety, there is so much more to do with it. And that is the value of this approach, because then you recognize, oh, I actually can do so much more about my life than I thought. Yeah. Because there are all these little and bigger problems to solve, but I'm going to place myself a 5-year goal, a year goal from now, a 5-year goal, a 10-year goal, and work towards it one step at a time. It's a great thing to do, because I read one of Tony Robbins' books a while ago, when he says that many people horribly overestimate what they can do in a year, and then they get disappointed when they don't achieve it, but they profoundly underestimate what they can achieve in 10, 15, or 20 years. This is the perseverance process, right? And that's why you push yourself all these multiple goals with all areas of your life, because it's not just one area that you have to focus on. That's not your entire life. I'm sorry, there are many more aspects of your life. 5, and I kept it as simple as possible. It really is simple, right? 5 aspects. Some people say 10 aspects, 15 aspects, forget it. 5, keep it simple, but work on it all, because it's complex enough, right?
So let's confront the elephant in the room. How do we work on each of those areas every single day? Do you, and I guess kind of a loaded question, how do you track it? How do you focus on, okay, I'm going to focus on relationships at this time, fitness at this time, career here, finances here? Like, how do you do all of them at once, especially for someone who is new to this process and they're overwhelmed? What does it look like?
So you analyze each area first in a notebook or on a computer, any way you want. You see where you are at. You see where you want to be, but you have to find out where you want to be. And it's a very honest self-exploration process, because most people are not happy because they have no clue what will make them happy. So you need to think about that. It takes a week or 2 maybe. See, when I was reading my first self-confidence book that I was reading, that I got inspired years ago, the hardest thing for me was to write goals, specific goals. And every darn book wanted me to write goals. And I'm like, oh my God, this is the hardest thing to do. And it took years for me to realize that the goals I was writing just to follow the process in the book were really not my goals. So you need to really, really think about your goals, and you need to allow yourself the time to think about the goals in all these areas of your life.
Whose goals were they that you were writing down if they weren't your goals?
People who I grew around, parents, friends, relatives, teachers, people who told me, oh, that would be very nice to do, this and this is bad, this is good. And who determines that, though? At some point, you have to find out for yourself what is good for you, what is bad for you. I mean, I can give you an example. When I told my parents over the phone that I was switching careers, they were petrified because of the work I had done, because of the unknown that I was going to face with chemistry, math, sociology, psychology, anatomy and physiology, med surgical nursing, pharmacology. And they said, isn't it time to move to Europe and find a job in Europe as a violinist? I said, guys, Europe is 3 times more crowded than the United States. So they had no realistic perspective of what really was going on in the music world while they were both musicians, okay? So that was one example. Then people and friends and parents were also very opposed to me doing karate. I started karate at age 30 because it had been a dream of mine since the 3rd grade, which my dad said, absolutely no, you're a violinist, you're going to break a finger or hand. No way, okay? And so that was the other thing they were opposed to. I did it for 12 years, best decision ever. Another thing that of course, not so much the parents, but there were some friends and colleagues when I told them I was going to be an investor and start a real estate investing career, there are all sorts of arguments, right? So you follow people's opinions that are very well intentioned and they're completely wrong. So this is the process. That's also what impedes your true goal, finding your true goals and true purpose in life. This is why you need to sit down and really think about what you want to accomplish in all of the 5 aspects of your life, because they're connected with each other. You can't have good health if you can't afford awesome nutrition and the time to study about the awesome nutrition, because the great nutrition is not necessarily expensive. Mm-hmm. It's not necessarily expensive. It has to be organic. It has to be non-GMO and preferably plant-based, okay? So you need to do the research, but you need to have the time to do that. So you can't be working 5 different jobs to make ends meet to try and fix your health. So you need to prioritize your time. Time prioritization is huge, okay? Yeah. And then in order to have the time to do all this, you need to prioritize your relationships. You can't be spending 2 hours in a coffee shop talking with a friend about your colleagues and your other friends. That is a complete waste of time. It's not unloading. It's not recharging in any way. It's not contributing in any way to your personal growth. You can go to the gym and talk about your problems for 20 minutes with another gym peer. That's not what the gym is for. All these things, you know. Yeah. So chaos in people's minds and actions. So this is what really the focus is on. And that's how you find your goals, when you eliminate all that garbage from your mind and actions and daily activities. Then you find your true goals and start working on every single one of them.
Wow. Okay. So just to take what you just said there. So it sounds like what you're saying is a lot of us, and including myself, sometimes we are distracted by these 2-hour coffee shop conversations, going to the gym and just talking. Like I was at the gym this morning and I saw these 2 guys talking the whole time, which is great. No judgment. Simply, I'm just observing. What
Judgment. Yes, judgment.
Or maybe judgment, right?
Useless activity.
I start my workout and I finish it, and these guys are still talking, and I'm like, wow, like they have done nothing, but they're going to go home and say, I went to the gym today. But it's like, you did, but you weren't there when you were there. So you've wasted this time. This is
and your money.
And your money. Absolutely. Yeah. Is this your definition of conventional living, being distracted, wasting time, doing things that have no value?
And then seeking entertainment just to supposedly take yourself away from your stress that you have created in the first place, because you haven't focused on what you were supposed to do in the first place.
So what do you believe it is that brings you freedom and happiness? Do you believe that it's entertainment? Like, what is it that has brought you the most happiness in your pursuit of what it is you now teach?
The most happiness happened when I faced my problems and I solved them. And that now I'm not afraid of other challenges, and that I can do whatever I want because I want it. And what I do gives me perfect satisfaction, staying busy all day long and focused. This is an amazing thing that I really struggled to achieve for a long time. And for almost 2 decades, I had no clue how distracted I was, even though I was practicing between 4 walls for 7 to 9 hours a day, being focused. That was the most distracted time of my life.
So you've been the least happiest when you were most distracted, and you've been the most happy when you were actually very, very busy and focused on what it is you were going after.
Bringing measurable results, yes.
Measurable results in your life. So happiness comes from what you just said, solving problems. But is it not true that there's always a new problem based on the one that you
There is, but you're not afraid of it anymore. See, for me, it's subjective. But because I was so afraid of facing my problems and let alone solve them, the ability to do what exactly the opposite, face the problem, solve it right away, and work, or if it's a longer problem, just taking the challenge and seeing how your life flourishes in every area. That is happiness to me, because it was unachievable. It seemed unachievable for a very long time.
It's so true. No, I whenever I see someone, and I say this all the time, and again, like you said, just like your editor said, it's very controversial. It's going to upset people. When I am with somebody who is unhappy, they're like, I just don't know what to do. I'm very unhappy. Or they use the D word. They're very depressed, right? Or anxious is the new buzzword of the century. You know, I'm anxious. I have anti-anxiety medications, anti-depression medications. And it's like, what if there was a natural medication of being so busy that you didn't even realize that you're quote unquote depressed, right? I've never met a busy person who was constantly challenged, who was moving forward, because there are a lot of busy people I know who just work 14-hour days and they work 6 days a week. Busy and moving forward are not the same things, but the busy person who is moving forward, I've never met someone like that who says, Brandon, I'm depressed. Exactly. I just never met them. They're too busy to be depressed. They're too busy to think of anxiety. They experience the stage fright, the self-esteem, the self-talk. They experience that. But it's like, I have to do this. This is what I do. This is who I am. So the act of moving forward in itself is how you find happiness, the act of solving those problems and not blaming, not just complaining at the coffee shop or the gym about the problem. It's moving forward and solving these issues. But then people are going to say, Alexandra, oh, well, you know, I just don't want to be busy all day, right? If you're just busy all day, then what is life other than doing? You're constantly doing and then you die. Like, what do you say to someone who says something like that?
That means they're not doing the things that they're purposed to do. They're doing things that are not contributing to their well-being for somebody else's sake. That's what they're doing. They're not really, they haven't found their true purpose in life. And as far as anxiety, you're absolutely right about anxiety and depression. I have so many patients who are taking anti-anxiety and anti-depression pills. I've never seen anything like this in my country. Now I'm sure because we're following the Western model, probably there are people who are antidepressants and anti-anxiety pills in Bulgaria too. But I have dedicated quite a few pages in chapter 3 on anxiety and how anxiety can be either debilitating or highly motivating if you choose to turn it into a propelling, motivating factor in your life. Why am I anxious? What am I supposed to be doing with this problem that's making me anxious? Why is it making me anxious? How can I do better there? How can I build something from it and actually have a great outcome from my anxiety? But very few people ask themselves that question. And yes, then they feel burnt out. They don't want to be busy because they don't know what to get themselves busy with. I think that's what it is, because you need to know what to get busy with in order to make yourself happy. This is why, again, we go back to chapter 1, when you do that self-search, the self-evaluation, where you are, where you want to be. But you have to do it with all the 5 aspects of your life, because if you don't do that, 1 or 2 of these aspects will be in the way because you've neglected it and it's still in a crappy stage when you're trying to fix the other 3. That's what makes your responsibility bigger than you want at the time, but in the long term, it pays very handsomely and generously.
It's so true. And pays handsomely, not necessarily in money, but in the way that you feel about yourself.
Everything, because you're addressing your financial aspect along with your career aspect, which many people confuse to be the same thing, and it's not the same thing, right? So with their careers, they work, but the consciousness of I'm working for a paycheck, that's just a horrible mindset. That's what kills people's desire to do anything outside of work. But if you work to be useful and solve other people's problems, and then the financial aspect is you learn how to be financially disciplined and educated to save the money, to then invest it and grow assets that cash flow regardless of your job. That's where your whole career and financial life get to a completely different level. So then it is your choice whether to work or not to work after 5 or 7 years, because you build the cash flowing assets. Now you have money that covers more than your monthly expenses. And you're a financially free person. Guess what? That's awesome. So all this is tied together, okay? And if people tell you, yeah, I'm busy all day and then I just want to go to bed, you're doing something very wrong with your time.
Yep. Absolutely. So I want to talk about finances real quick, just because I'm curious. And like you said, the 2 biggest culprits are fitness and finances when it comes to someone who is lacking in confidence and self-esteem. And I completely agree. When I was 21, I got into shape. I felt better immediately after starting. And then 6 months from then, I was on top of the world, best period of my life. And it's only gotten better since. But before that, I was 60 pounds heavier. I was unhappy. I used the D word that we just talked about, depression. And fitness was the catalyst for me. By focusing on that, and improved everything else. finances was a very, very close second. Were you always financially educated? Did your parents educate you financially? When did you become educated yourself financially?
My mother is the only parent who is alive right now, but she is telling all her friends how in chapter 10 I described her and dad as financial invalids. And I said, Mom, that's not what I said. That's what I've told you in private many times when we're joking around, but that's not what the chapter says about you guys. I'm just saying how I learned from your mistakes in life, because they lived in a country that was completely backwards. So Brandon, I mean, communist Bulgaria, I'm sorry, but that was really, really horrible, horrible time to live there, financially in many other ways. But no, I was extremely ignorant financially until I decided to stop being that way. So we're talking 2013, okay? I was 36 years old, and that's a long time to be financially uneducated. And it happened because I thought I was going to be I was going to be able to coast on the nursing profession until the day I decided not to retire. And in the first year when I started nursing, I saw how the nurses actually lived and how they were treated by these giant corporations that were and still are devouring hospital after hospital. The doctors were treated poorly to some extent too, but the nurses, like the burnout, people calling off because they didn't feel like working with or without reason, and then actual burnout. So I went into nursing because it was a profession I could find a job all over the world. And then because of the staffing shortage, and then I saw the staffing shortage had another face. It has people that were calling in, even though they were working at the place, they were calling in because they just didn't want to work anymore. And there were many nurses that were broke, even though they were making better money than me because they had seniority and they had way more experience than I had at the job. So they had gotten lots of promotions ahead of me. And then I figured this is just wrong. Okay, I need to learn how rich, wealthy people are producing income that they don't work for. And then I started reading books on investing, and real estate really caught my attention. I own no real estate at all when I purchased my first investment property. It was a multifamily. And it was a very exciting time because it was a steep learning curve, but financial education, so lots of books, mentorship, and then practice. And now, I mean, for the last 3 years, we've been completely financially free, but I was extremely, extremely ignorant financially when I first, just as I was ignorant about science in 2008, and I figured that had to change. In 2013, actually 2012, 2013 is when I decided I need to put myself now through yet another education. It's not going to be a college education because the college professors, they work for money to make ends meet. So I hired a self-made millionaire to teach me how to become like him and his wife.
Wow. Okay, a couple questions. What year did you invest in your first multifamily, your first property?
End of 2014.
So only a few years after you really started the financial journey, you invested.
Mm-hmm. Yes, because I took the classes, the mentorship and everything. And because I paid quite a bit of money for this online class, when you pay the money, you commit. If you don't pay the money, you don't commit. It's simple as that.
Was this online class? Would you recommend it to other people, or are there better resources out there?
Absolutely. There are many great resources. I wrote pretty extensively about the Rich Dad Company, Robert Kiyosaki and Kim Kiyosaki. I first read 7 of Robert's books before I committed to paying for 2 of his online courses.
Okay.
And great mentorship because he really started from scratch in his life. His wife did too. So there are not some people who were born in rich families that inherited riches. So I could relate very well to that because I wasn't wealthy by any stretch of the imagination when I started that. And if somebody else could do it, why couldn't I? That was the first thought that occurred to me. And then I became very ambitious and curious. And this is where the main trend in the book is. If I could do it, you can do it.
Yeah.
Because I was nowhere financially or anywhere when I started first. So if I could do it as a foreigner, immigrant in this country, anybody can.
Absolutely. So everything you're talking about comes down to this idea that we have at our disposal today, which is self-education. And if you take that self-assessment from chapter 1 of your book and you do it, and you realize that fitness and finances are those 2 places that have just been holding you back, than you have options now, when in the 80s, even the 90s, even the early 2000s, you didn't have YouTube. You didn't have Audible. You didn't have Amazon where you can go just buy a book to have it shipped right to your house. You didn't have those options. You maybe had the library, and that's if you're lucky enough to have a nice library in your town, right? Like, we have more tools now to change our life than we've ever had before. And I'd like to ask you, what changed about your confidence once you became financially free and you started to reap the rewards of the seeds that you sowed?
The confidence had changed before the financial independence, because I got very intimidated by the financial language that Robert Kiyosaki was using in his book. I couldn't understand 75% of it. I described this in chapter 11 because it was a very funny journey, actually. But I reminded myself, I literally told myself, you idiot, you went into a scientific profession, medical profession, with zero knowledge about science and medicine. You studied your butt off 8-9 hours a day for 3 years. You nailed all the classes, and now you're practicing as a clinical professional, and you're afraid of financial language? Start working and learn it. That's literally what I told myself. So the confidence was already there because I knew I had drastically changed profession already. And then, of course, when I built the financial independence over the next 5 years, now the confidence is like, really, it makes you more humble in some ways to understand other people's problems. And you're more willing to help them if they're willing to learn. Okay. Yeah. And that's where the coaching business started, because when I wrote the book, I was not a coach yet. And many of the podcast hosts were asking me, you coach, right? You coach people, right? And I said, yes, I coach. And then I started the business. I built this extra page on the website. I started getting the mentees because people wanted to know. And I had mentored people before, way before the book, on investing and getting your first investment property. I had done that. And then I teach patients all the time because I'm in a good position as a nurse. I have a one-on-one contact with my patients.
Cool.
And I can teach them much more than I was able to when I was working in the hospital. So all these things combined, why not coach people if they're willing to learn? But again, financially, I mean, if you pay for it, you commit.
Yes.
The free advice, you will just sit there and think about it. You won't put any pressure on yourself. It's an unfortunate thing of human mindset, but it's very true. And I learned it through myself again, through my personal experience.
Mm-hmm. When you pay attention.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, just like I'm sure. Yeah, exactly. I'm sure when you bought that Robert Kiyosaki course, the Rich Dad course, you were even more motivated to take action on what you were learning, because you're like, okay, I spent money on this. Now I'm looking to get a return on that money that I spent.
It was hard because I was paid very low as a nurse at the time. It was my first year in nursing when I woke up to say, oh, this medical system really sucks, right? So I need to have an alternative while I still work and help people, but I can't just rely on the job because of the turnover, and job security is a myth. So I paid a lot of money. I took 2 of his classes at the time, and cool. I had to plan how to save to pay my credit card off every month so I don't pay interest. It was hard. It was the first time I had to responsibly plan my finances because of this course. And I was nowhere near being an investor yet. I was just learning how to be an investor. Oh my gosh, that's going to be almost like a third of my nursing college price. And it paid off much more than that. And that was Robert's point at the very beginning. He says, with this class, you actually will make money much faster than any profession. And he was completely right about that. But again, the action is up to you, because he can teach you until he turns blue in the face. But ultimately, you have to go out there and do it. And when you put the money in the class, you go out and there and do it.
Yeah. You're a very inspiring person. And specifically if I had to label one word that you give off, it's hope. You give people hope that you can move from one field to another and succeed. You give people hope that if they have this pressing problem, you can move through this problem. You give people hope that if they don't know anything about a specific thing, you can learn about that specific thing. And I think hope and faith is the most powerful force aside from love out there in the world. And if we have more of that hope, it's so powerful. So I invite everyone listening to go grab your copy of Alexandra's book, okay? Because you just said when you pay attention. Pay the very, very, very small investment to grab a copy of Alexandra's book.
Yeah, right.
Start there, go through chapter 1, do the self-assessment, go through all the other chapters to build on that. And would you be able to hold your book up for everyone, for those watching, so they can see?
Here's the book.
For those listening,
light. There you go.
I like it. It looks very nice. It's a big book, 400 pages. And for those listening, the title is, It Really Is Simple, A Holistic Approach to Self-Confidence. So I'm going to ask you where we can find the book. And for everyone listening and watching, it's in the description as well. But I'd like to ask you a few rapid fire questions if you're up for that.
Of course.
Okay. So first question, can you tell us something that you do every day that some people may find unusual, but it has attributed to your overall success?
Planning of my day from start to finish.
When do you do that? The end of the day before or the beginning of the day?
Both.
Interesting.
Both. So I plan it in the evening before, when I'm already in my bed, because the evenings are very inspiring. See, one of my challenges is to go to bed early because my brain works very well at night. But when I'm in bed and I plan the next day, everything is now set in stone. And in the morning, I just fine-tune it.
Oh, very interesting.
And in the morning, you have to confront your reluctance to go through your actions. That's in the morning, you absolutely have to confront immediately your reluctance to get out of bed and do what you planned for last night.
Yeah.
And that's like the stick method a little bit, but it helps. It helps me a lot.
I like that. And do you plan it in your head or do you write it down?
I am at the point where I plan it in my head, but there is something that I really, it's kind of like a big problem that I'm not willing to tackle. I write it down and then all this dissipates and I remove all the emotion. That's another thing I talk in chapter 2 about. Remove the emotion from the problem. If it's a really big problem or something that you really don't want to do, because you'll always be able to acknowledge that this is not your favorite activity of the day, but you remove the emotion and you focus on where this is going to bring you in the long term and why it is so useful and important. And then it becomes like 10 times easy to do and get it over with.
Yes. I love that. Thank you. Second question. What is one wild or adventurous thing that you did in your life that really pushed your boundaries and taught you something valuable about yourself?
Well, I almost killed myself twice hiking on the mountain, once in the winter and once in the summer in Bulgaria.
Really?
I hiked for almost 2 hours in snow that was up to my neck until I realized I was freezing and I went back. It was a trail that I had always hiked, but in the winter it had put so much snow that I decided, I'm going to go to wherever. And after 2 hours on a trail that normally takes me an hour and a half, and I was less than halfway through, I realized I probably should not be swimming through 2 meters of snow through my neck. And I always hiked by myself, like 95% of the time when I was a teenager. And the second time when I tried to climb a vertical rock, which I did climb, but that was one of the scariest things because I started climbing. It looked okay from the bottom, but I realized I couldn't go back. So the only way was up. And at that point, I always felt like I was going to die. And yeah, that was pretty adventurous. My mother didn't want to hear the end of the stories either time. When she learned what I had started, that's it. I don't want to listen anymore. And she shut the door in front of me. And that was it, my bedroom. Mm-hmm.
Wow. So what a story that is. I have so many questions on that, but I wish we had more time. Let's go to the third rapid fire. That was very cool. Third rapid fire. If you had to give a TED Talk tomorrow, and it could not be on the topic of self-confidence or self-esteem, what would you speak about in this TED Talk?
Oh, that's an easy question. I can speak about health, diet, fitness, martial arts, investing in real estate, options trading. I can speak on lots of topics competently, and that's the problem with most people who interview me because they like to fixate on 1 or 2 topics.
Yes. Yeah.
And the holistic approach is about everything.
It's true. It's true. I love it. I've really enjoyed this time together. For those listening, where can they grab a copy of your book, Alexandra?
So the paperback is available on my website only and to US buyers only. It's holisticselfconfidence.com. On the same website, there is also an ebook that is downloadable worldwide. And it's, of course, less expensive because there is no price involved with the printing. And the ebook is also available on Apple Books, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and Smashwords with all of their distributing stores where they distribute to.
Amazing. And for everyone listening, there are links in the description to each of those locations based on where you live so that you can grab your copy of Alexandra's book. Make sure you go do that. Alexandra, this has been an inspiring conversation. It's not that I didn't expect this conversation, but I've taken away a lot more personally than I have in many of the other conversations I've had. While those were great, I feel like this was like on a next level, and I feel like I've really connected with you. And I know that that's going to be the same for a lot of other people listening too. So thank you for your time. It's very early there, so I'm really glad you made it happen. And I've had a lot of fun. Thank you very much.
Likewise, Brandon, thank you so much for having me. It was really a wonderful conversation. It's great talking with you. And I hope we were useful to your audience.
Oh, you were. Thank you. No matter where you're at in your life right now, job transition, a failing relationship, moving to a different country, confronting a problem, confronting an area of your life that it's time to confront to figure out where you are now, where you want to go. I know that this conversation with Alexandra is going to be helpful for you. And you already have next steps from this conversation. You have the next steps that are outlined in Alexandra's book. And just, again, the title of Alexandra's book is It Really Is Simple, a holistic approach to self-confidence. And you can get started right now to take a look at those 5 key areas of your life. Where are you now? And where is it that you want to be in those areas? What's your goal for each of those areas? Awareness is powerful. And once you have that awareness, you can get to work on those areas, because there's no problem you can't solve. And there is no reality you cannot live if you start now. If you found value from this episode, please share this with just one other person who could use it as well. Thank you for being the best part of the Be Better family. And until we talk again next time, continue to be better.